next, our final news roundup and information overload hour.
Well, I think the uranium sale to Russia and the way it was done, so underhanded, with tremendous amounts of money being passed, I actually think that's Watergate modern aid.
As you know, President Trump has tried to flip the script and now says the Justice Department should be investigating you. Mm-hmm. And this week we learned that Attorney General Sessions is considering a special counsel to probe the Uranium One deal and alleged conflicts with the Clinton Foundation. What's your reaction to this?
You know, I regret deeply that this appears to be the politicization of the Justice Department and our justice system. This Uranium One story has been debunked countless times by members of the press, by independent experts. It is nothing but a false charge that the Trump administration is trying to drum up in order to avoid attention being directed at them. I mean, even Trey Gowdy, somebody who's hardly a fan of mine, said that there doesn't seem to be the basis for a special counsel. And of course, there isn't. But if I try to take myself out of it, which, is kind of hard because it's personally offensive that they would do this. But taking myself out of it, this is such an abuse of power, and it goes right at the rule of law.
As you know, Sean Hannity on his program has been very critical of the Uranium One deal. The president saying, with regard to Russia, that's the real story in all of this. What would you say to those critics?
I would say it's the same baloney they've been peddling for years, and there's been no credible evidence by anyone. In fact, it's been debunked repeatedly and will continue to be debunked. But here's what they're doing, and really, I have to give them credit. Trump and his allies, including Fox News, are really experts at distraction and diversion.
All right, news roundup and information overload. 800-941-SEAN, our toll-free telephone number. You want to be a part of the program. The big media story missed last year is now that the Russia collusion investigation is going away. Well, now we really have probably the biggest political boomerang that is now opening and evolving right before our very eyes, because there was Russia collusion in the 2016 presidential race. And now we know, after a year's worth of denials, it was Hillary Clinton and the DNC, controlled by Clinton, money that paid for the phony Russian lies and dossier to propagandize, mislead, misinform you, the American people, before a presidential election. And then, of course, we have all these other issues. I've watched over vacation very little TV in terms of news, but the narrative now has been set. They're not talking and reporting breathlessly and hysterically every day the latest on Trump-Russia collusion, because that is now pretty much ended up debunked at this point and will be debunked. There's no evidence after a year. So the only thing they can say is, as a result of the investigations, and this is typical Democratic overreach, well, then we've discovered a whole lot of real collusion, not just the dossier. Then you got James Comey putting the fix in with pro-Hillary, anti-Trump Peter Strzok and his FBI girlfriend, Lisa Page. And we know what they are involved in. And we know that they were writing an exoneration before an investigation. And then it extends out even further when you got this guy, Orr, 4 doors down from Rod Rosenstein and his shenanigans and what he's involved in. And his wife is actually part of the Fusion GPS dossier building team. We got to get answers to that question and those questions. And, well, Hillary can say all she wants that Uranium One has been debunked. No, it's not. There never was a good explanation why we would ever allow a foreign entity access to America's uranium when we don't have enough uranium. And that Robert Mueller and others knew in 2009 and before CFIUS signed off on that deal, including Hillary Clinton and Eric Holder. Well, we knew about bribery, extortion, and kickbacks and money laundering that was all taking place by Russian agents. In other words, Putin's pets that were here in America. That was all happening. And Mueller and company did nothing. And then we allowed a foreign entity to, in fact, take 20% control of our uranium. And then all the money with all the people associated with that deal kicking back as much as $145 million of the Clinton Foundation. All of this now is boomeranging back because the Russia-Trump collusion story's dying. It's dead on a vine. It's withering. So the media, in their desperation, has now decided that anyone that talks about, let's see, Robert Mueller and his corrupt band of merry lawyers that he put together, and all the donations that they gave to the DNC and Obama and Hillary and Andrew Weissman, who had an overturn in the U.S. Supreme Court 9-0 in the Enron case, or in the Anderson accounting case, Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals, and that the obstruction of justice case in one was thrown out. People spent a year in jail. That was thrown out and overturned. And then you have all these people that donate only to Democrats, not Republicans. And now all of this is ending up being investigated. And of course, we had broken the news. It was interesting. CNN breaks the news while we're on vacation. Oh, Jeff Sessions hadn't recused himself from Uranium One. I'm like, okay, we did that on November 3rd, and we were reporting it even before that. Here to weigh in on the status of all of this, Peter Schweizer. He got the ball rolling with Clinton Cash, the New York Times bestseller, The Untold Story of how and why foreign governments and businesses help make Bill and Hillary rich. Also, Gregg Jarrett is with us, Fox News legal analyst. Is there anything, Peter, that I'm missing here in terms of how this is all literally boomerang back, and is the 2018 we could call the year of the boomerang?
Well, no, I think you're exactly right, Sean. Look, you and I talked in January of last year, January 2017, before Donald Trump was inaugurated, and the issue of alleged Russian collusion came up. And my view was investigate all of it, investigate the stuff on the Trump side of the roster, look at the Clinton stuff. And what we've done now a year later is there's been a thorough investigation of the Trump side. There's really nothing there, but there's been very little official investigation of the Clinton side of the ledger. We know that the FBI, 5 field offices have investigated. They tried in 2016 to get the Obama Department of Justice to give them subpoena power and the other tools to really give it a thorough vetting. They were turned down with that request. So as it stands right now, we've only looked at one side of this question of Russia ties, the Trump side. No evidence has developed there that's compelling in any way, and yet the Clinton side has not been investigated. And I think from the beginning what we wanted is consistency and looking at all the facts. Let's put all the facts on the table and see what they bear out.
And your take, Gregg Jarrett, I mean, I've got to imagine people are going to go to jail, but it's not going to be the people that Americans for a year were lied to and told they're going to be going to jail.
That's right, and Peter has put his finger on it very nicely. There is no evidence of Trump-Russian collusion, but a plethora of evidence of Hillary Clinton and Democratic Russian collusion. You know, it's a crime to pay money to a foreign national for a dossier in a political campaign. That's a crime. It's a violation of 2 federal statutes. And yet I'm seeing no movement by anyone in the Department of Justice or the FBI, and certainly not Mueller, to investigate and bring charges on that basis. And the second part is, the Uranium One and Hillary Clinton, her usual vacuous excuse, it's all been debunked. If it were debunked, then it would not now be the subject of a current criminal investigation by the Department of Justice and congressional committees. So as I've long argued, I don't have a great deal of confidence in Jeff Sessions. I do think there ought to be a second special counsel to investigate Hillary, Democratic Russian collusion with the dossier, and quid pro quo, maybe money laundering, mail fraud, wire fraud in Uranium One, because the Clinton...
What about the investigators, though? What about somebody like Comey and Peter Strzok that, I've got to believe there's a possible obstruction charge there if you're writing an exoneration and you haven't done your work, your investigation.
Well, as to Comey, he violated 18 U.S.C. 641. He stole government documents. It's a crime. It's larceny. He took 7 presidential memos with him. I'm told some of it contains classified information. It's a clear violation of the law. And if he fixed it so Hillary would be exonerated, that's obstruction of justice if he did it for a political reason, together with Peter Strzok, Andrew McCabe, and others.
What's your take, Peter, in terms of now, where this all ends up in terms of the year and how this impacts the political process? Look, I spent a lot of time today talking about Donald Trump's first year and Donald Trump's successes and Donald Trump's promises made and promises kept. The year ended well, especially with the economic package that the Republicans finally got done and passed. We already have seen a lot of regulations that have been taken away, but this bill in particular gets rid of the Obama mandate and also opens up ANWR to drilling. That to me has always been a potential source of millions of high-paying career jobs. Does it all come down to the economy? Does this now go off into the distance, or does this get finished?
Well, it's a good question, Sean. And look, I think the real question here, and I would defer to Gregg on the legal side of this, but look, there's a very real possibility that the Mueller investigation is going to go well beyond what it was intended to. You know, the independent counsel laws are pretty vague in terms of what you can look into. You can look into anything. And, you know, what was supposed to be an investigation about the 2016 election and alleged collusion involving the campaign and Russian government entities, you now have, charges that have been brought in the cases, involving some people already that predate the 2016 campaign. And there are reports that, financial records and business transactions involving Jared Kushner, possibly involving the Trumps earlier than that, 2013, 2014, are being asked for. If that is the case, it's hard to see how any of that has anything to do with 2016. So I think that, anybody who hopes and thinks that Mueller is going to sort of close the book on this and say we didn't find anything related to 2016, I think he is going to feel the pressure to come up with something, and it's going to be something that's really not related to the initial purpose of the investigation to begin with. And I think that's a real cloud hanging over
But that's
Trump.
what he's done so far. But he's got his own issues that he's going to have to deal with. And if there's going to be, again, equal justice under the law, it would seem that either other special counsels need to be appointed or he needs to follow the rule of law, but that would first mean dismantling a team of Democratic donors that he has hired and also people with questionable ethics and practices in past cases and a pretty abysmal track record. All right, stay right there. More with Peter Schweizer, more with Gregg Jarrett. All right, as we continue, the author of the best-selling book, Clinton Cash, The Untold Story of How and Why Foreign Governments and Businesses Helped to Make Bill and Hillary Rich, Gregg Jarrett, Fox News legal analyst. Let me go to the story about Uma Abedin, who is Crooked Hillary's top aide and now being accused of disregarding basic security protocols and putting classified passwords into the hands of foreign agents. And we remember Christian Saucier. He was the guy that took 6 pictures aboard a submarine, and he's spending a year in jail away from his daughter and his mother and his family. The president reminds us, and he said, deep state Justice Department must finally act also on Comey and others. Is the president right to point out this lack of equal justice under the law? Gregg Jarrett.
Oh, I think absolutely the president is correct about that. And your mentioning of Uma Abedin, this is the woman who told the FBI she knew nothing about Hillary Clinton's private email server during the entire course of 4 years as Secretary of State. And yet, documents demonstrate she well knew it. And indeed, she kept her own email account on the same private email server in the basement of Hillary Clinton's home. So I think it's fair to say that Uma Abedin has little credibility. How she has managed to escape criminal prosecution.
Who are the people that should be afraid that they're in legal jeopardy as we kick off this year?
Oh, I would say certainly Hillary Clinton is at the top of the list for the things we've talked about. But I think all of her top aides who appear to have in some form or fashion deceived the FBI and members of Congress, they're all in legal jeopardy for that. And I think some people at the FBI who may have, for political purposes, pardon me?
Specifically, Comey, McCabe?
Peter Strzok, Andrew McCabe, James Baker. 3 of those people I've mentioned have been, either removed from the Mueller case or demoted or shifted over at the FBI. They're cleaning house over there. They're cleaning their swamp. But more needs to be done, including criminal prosecutions, if appropriate.
And now that we know, Peter, that, in fact, you were right on Uranium One and way ahead of the curve, I guess we've got to ask you, now that we know the Attorney General has not recused himself, I've got to believe that case is wide open.
Yes, I think it is. I think the key question is, are you going to have the Department of Justice give the FBI the tools they need to subpoena Clinton personal financial records and Clinton Foundation records, emails or correspondence related to the Clinton Foundation, whether they're going to get access to those materials. And really, right now, the Department of Justice, when it comes to the Clinton issues, is essentially a ghost ship. You don't really have a senior crew, a captain of the ship that has a steady hand that says we're going to go and look into this. And that's a problem, because when it comes to other matters, they have been proactive and they have been aggressive. Some would say overly aggressive as it relates to Trump and other issues. But for some reason, there's this lack of consistency with the Clintons. Clearly now there are ties and relationships involving some people at the senior DOJ that explain that. But this is not going to go anywhere with Hillary Clinton if you don't get leadership of the Department of Justice. I'm not saying tip the scales against her or for her. I'm saying just let the investigation proceed.
All right, we'll leave it right there. Thank you all for being with us. Happy New Year. Gregg, Jarrett, Peter Schweizer. When we come back,